I want to ask if anybody knows how to read ancient Greek. Let's see. No, wait. There we go. Anybody read that? Well, I guess we're not going to know what the word says then if we can't read ancient Greek, right? All right. I'm going to transliterate it for you. Anybody read that? Oh, there we go. There it is. Anybody read that? What does that say? Ekklesia. Does anybody know what that word means? Has anybody ever heard that before? Yes. What does it mean? Called out. No, that's wrong. Well, that's good then, because that means that you guys are going to learn something hopefully today. If at the very least it is, what does Ekklesia mean? So, the church, who said that? Who said that? It means the church, yes. So, we've been on a, nope, go back. And you guys are down on the signals. All right, I'll do this. All right. We've been on the path of discovering who we are as a church for a long time, as Pastor Sam said. And today, we're going to be deliberating over, these are all the names that you guys have submitted to be the name of your church. And it's really been an exciting process for me to be a part of. Just facilitating the strategic planning team, kind of going through like what's the vision and mission of you guys and all that. And so I know that you're very anxious to find out what's our name going to be, because it's going to feel like you finally have some direction, some meaning to your lives as a congregation, and some definition as a church body. So I understand that, and I think that's awesome. I'm excited for you. However, if it weren't for the legality of needing to have a specific name to register as an official church in the state of Pennsylvania, I would actually be discouraging you from trying to figure out what your name is. Because God doesn't care what your name is. He cares how you live your lives. But let me encourage you with this, okay? It doesn't matter what you call yourselves, as long as God calls you His and that you act accordingly. That's all that really matters, okay? So yes, we're going to figure out what the church name is, and that's great. And there's nothing, I don't have anything against that specifically. Just as long as we remember who we really are, and that is God's children, God's beloved. Okay? Good? No one's throwing anything yet? It's good. All right. Because I believe in today's age of branding and logos and advertising and all that, we tend to compete with everybody else to get our chance to be recognized in the world. Like, look at me, like our sign's bigger, our sign's brighter, our name is cooler, it stands out more. Maybe sometimes it's too cool and we don't even know what it is. There's some advertisements we see today that are so far out there. Anybody watch the advertisements for Super Bowl? Half the time I didn't even know what it was they were advertising. So that all gets us completely distracted from the point, which is to share God's love with the world. So whatever we do, whether it's name the church, whether it's, come up with a logo, come up with a saying, what's our mission statement, however we build a building or whatever building we rent or where we're located, as long as we're loving others in God's name, that's all that truly matters. In John 13, Jesus was starting to give his final instructions to disciples before he went to the cross. Now, there's 4 Gospels that kind of run together and tell the same story, but they tell them a little bit differently. The Apostle John thought it was most important to share what Jesus said right before dying, whereas the other 3 apostles kind of wrote about what happened as Jesus died, if that makes sense. And so, in John 13, Jesus is starting this process of like, these are my final words to you guys. I was thinking this the other day. When somebody is getting ready to die, whatever they say, we all tend to lean in a little bit deeper, right? We're like, they know that time's running out and they're going to speak, so they're probably going to say the most important thing in their lives, what truly matters. That's where Jesus is right now, okay? So in John 13, Jesus is saying this in verses 34 and 35. He says, that's fine. I can read it too. It's fine. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all men and women will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Later on, in Acts 11:26, Luke wrote in Antioch, which was like the second biggest gathering of believers, that disciples were first called Christians there. Now, we're not gonna go through the whole book of Acts and kind of explain this, so I'm going to break it down for you. It doesn't say, Luke didn't write that they decided to call themselves Christians. It doesn't say that they realized they needed to unionize and develop a name so everybody knew who they were. It doesn't say that they all wanted to make cool shirts and hats and yard signs to put in front of their house to raise money, and they need to know what to put on it. It also doesn't say that the Apostle Paul started his first Instagram account and needed a spiritual or religious affiliation to attach to it. Rather, the outsiders, the onlookers of this group, this gathering of people that weren't in the club, are like, what are these people doing over here? Who are they? So they started trying to check out what's going on. They're like, there's something familiar about this, but we can't put our finger on it. What is it? So they kept watching what they're doing and these strange things that they're doing and having communion and talking about, eating the body and drinking the blood, but there really wasn't any bodies or blood, or what is all this stuff they're doing? And they're like, I got it. They're like that Christ guy. They're Christians. They're Christ-like. So as I was looking into this, and I was sharing this with Sam yesterday, it really intrigued me. Something just kind of stood out to me, and I had read that passage so many times before, and I was like, wait a second, where in the world is Antioch? So I pulled up a map. Oh, I forgot to tell you that one. There we go. So I pulled up a map, and I got two maps right here just to kind of give you an idea. So on the left-hand side, there's kind of like that's Israel there, and all those red words, they are all the different cities that we have. It in the Bible tells us that Jesus visited. That's where he did ministry. Okay, and I kind of highlighted Damascus up there. We know that the Apostle Paul was converted on the road to Damascus. Blah blah blah. Right, that's kind of like the northern edge of like where Israel and stuff is, because Damascus is actually in Syria. So then I was like, all right, but Antioch isn't anywhere on this map. Where is Antioch? So we had to zoom out a little bit and realize that it's all the way north up there towards the top of Syria. Now, maps can be deceiving. I don't know if you guys have tried to actually measure on a map. They have a little key, 1/16 of an inch equals 3 miles, 3.7 miles, and then you gotta all right, so that's 3.5 of my thumbprints, and now I need a calculator, and there's a fraction, and all right, so it's a long distance. But we got Google, right? So the next map I got is I actually figured out what is the difference between Damascus and Antioch. Okay. So as the crow flies, which is straight, right? It is 187 miles. The driving route today, a paved highway, 251 miles. So even if that's the same route that they would have taken back then, it wasn't a 4-lane highway, it was, and they weren't, driving Maseratis or anything. They were on horseback or probably walking, all right? These people never saw Jesus. The people in Antioch never saw Jesus. They wouldn't have traveled all the way down to Jerusalem. Now, maybe there were some Jews there that were coming down, but the general public, the heathens, the Gentiles, they had no reason to go that far south. So all that they knew about Jesus is what they heard. Jesus left behind this legend of loving others, of healing the sick, of raising people from the dead. The only reason he was famous is because he raised himself from the dead. And that's how word of him spread. And then this ragtag crew comes by and they start having meetings and doing exactly what he used to do. They're like, these people must have learned from this Christ guy. And that's how they came known as Christians. Not because of what they were wearing, not because they said, hey, we're like Christ. Because any of them who knew Christ were like, I am not even close to being like that guy. But they did their best to follow him, and that's why they were known as Christians. Something hit me really hard years ago, and I've shared it multiple times, and for the first time I'm having to correct myself in this. I did some more research than I had in the past. There's supposedly this quote by Mahatma Gandhi that says, I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are nothing like your Christ. And I've used that many times for myself, and I've thrown at other Christians to be like, be more like Christ. It's not really what he said. The author, E. Stanley Jones, if you've ever heard of him, he writes amazing things. If you haven't, get his books and start reading. He was a missionary to Asia, and he actually sat down and talked with Gandhi, who's a spiritual leader of another religion. And I'm like, if I ever sat with a spiritual leader who's like a Muslim or something like that, I don't know if I would ever ask this question. But he actually sat down and asked Gandhi, he said, if I want to bring Christianity to India, which is where Gandhi lived, how do I do that? How do I steal your people, right? Pretty much what he was asking. And what Gandhi really said was, I would suggest first that all of you Christians, missionaries and all, begin to live more like Jesus Christ. So the irony in all this is that Christian literally means like Christ, or a little Christ, a disciple of Christ. That's what Christian means. And I believe that's generally how we use it. The question is that how we live it? Essentially, if we need to tell people that we're Christians, we're not doing it right. They should be able to say, hey, you're like that Christ guy I heard about. You're like that Jesus guy that I heard about. And if we do want to tell others, we need to be more like him first so that we can actually do it. Now, I say all this just to preface what we want to talk about today, and that is the Ekklesia. Ekklesia is the Greek word that we find in the New Testament that's translated into the word church. The Hebrew term is kahal, which is, if we see the word kahal in the Old Testament, that is the word for assembly. Okay? And so both of these words mean the same thing. A gathering of citizens called out from their homes into some public place, or an assembly. An assembly of the people convened at the public place of the council for the purpose of deliberating. And in Greek terms, the way that they actually use this word ekklesia is to name what it is, the assembly of the citizens in the democratic city-states of ancient Greece. So when they wanted to have a town hall meeting, they had an ekklesia. When they wanted to talk about what's going on in their lives and what needs to change, they had an ekklesia. When they wanted to announce something to the people, they had an ekklesia. In the Old Testament, this was most prevalent when Moses would meet with God in the tabernacle, and everyone would stand outside their tents and face the tabernacle as the presence of the Lord descended and God and Moses convened face to face. So when you read the scriptures, it talks about, Moses would go to the tent of meeting, tabernacle, and the presence of God would drop, and, he could be in there for 5 minutes, be like, yo, what up, God? How's it going today? How the stars aligning and stuff, everything working out for you, Or he could be in there for hours. It didn't matter. And everybody, the entire nation of Israel, would stop whatever they're doing, stand outside their own tent, face the tabernacle, and stand there in awe of God's presence with them. That's the Ekklesia. So whenever you read about the assembly in the Old Testament, think Ekklesia, think church. Okay? In the New Testament, we see this first appear in a very popular passage in Matthew 16, 15 to 18. We see that Jesus is actually in the process of kind of establishing his apostles. And he says to all of them, "Who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answers, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it." Now that is a powerful passage for us, and it tells us a lot about who we are as followers of Christ, as children of God. But I want to pull out this word church, this ekklesia that's in here. And we know that when Jesus was talking to Peter, he probably didn't say this in Greek. Like John, that was Matthew. Matthew didn't write it in Hebrew or Aramaic as was their normal talking language. He wrote it in the trade language of Greek because this way they could share it with others a lot easier. So he would have used this a form of the term of the assembly. He would have said kahal. He would have said, "I will build my assembly on this rock." This rock is the truth that Jesus is the Son of the living God. So we might look at this passage and think that it means that Peter's going to go start planting churches in the name of Christ. But what Jesus was really saying was, "My presence will be among you once again, and I will never leave you nor forsake you. And this time, the enemy will no longer rob you of that." So the church has nothing to do with what we call ourselves, but our unity in our belief in Jesus as the Christ, Son of the living God. Do you believe that? Okay, it wasn't everybody. Okay. All right. There's a lot of head nods, okay? All right. Just making sure that we're all on the same track, all right? So, one other irony in all this that I learned is that when the Greeks would have this ekklesia, this gathering of citizens, before that they had buildings to meet in, they would instead gather a crowd on a hillside, and the adjutant or the speaker, whoever the organizer was, would stand up on the hill and speak to the people. What else does this remind you of? Sermon on the Mount. Jesus started his church before we started calling it church. He was having this assembly way back when, and Jesus just continued that tradition. Since the Reformation, I'm not going to get into a historic study of that. We as believers in Jesus Christ as the Son of the living God have been finding excuses to separate ourselves from one another instead of how to unite at the foot of the cross. Richard Foster, he wrote a book highlighting these differences and how it would be beneficial for us to learn from the various traditions of the Christian faith. It's a little confrontational. It makes us uneasy. But it might surprise you to learn that there actually are true Christians participating in the Roman Catholic Church. And that God is actually taking part in the charismatic stream of Christianity. Or how about the liturgical practices of the Methodists? And would you believe that the Puritans and Mennonites actually are the faith traditions that have influenced this very gathering that you find yourself in today? The intriguing work that Foster has done is research these different traditions, which we tend to shy away from because we don't quite understand them. We don't do things the same way they do. And he discovered the biblical backing for each and every one of them and the spiritual significance of us practicing in those very different ways. The Ekklesia, or the gathering of believers in God's presence, or the unity of the Spirit, which we as a global church tend to advocate, is the joint gathering of all these different denominations, traditions, and expressions of faith. So from here on out, when I say we or the church, I'm not talking about just you guys gathering here, those of you watching on the video, but all of us who believe in Jesus the Christ around the world, before, currently, and to come. Now, one struggle that I have had since becoming a follower of Jesus is the lack of esprit de corps. Now, this is a term that I learned in the Marines, and it's one of our founding principles in the Marine Corps. It's a feeling of pride, of fellowship, of common loyalty shared by the members of a particular group. Let me give you an example. And this isn't just like a for instance. This is actually happened. So if I'm in a place and I discover that somebody else in that building, in that area, whatever, is also a Marine, we instantly have a bond. We don't know each other. We maybe are from different generations. You know, maybe it's somebody who was in Vietnam or World War II, right? We have an instant bond. And we know that everything falls apart. Something happens. Something goes down. We got each other's back. No questions asked. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to negotiate it. There's no contract. There's like, hey man, if this happens, like you got my back. No, we already know what's going to happen. In fact, if something does go down, the first thing we're probably going to think is, where is that other buddy of mine? Where do I find them? Let's link up. And when we do, we're going to have a common language. We're going to help each other out, and we will fight to the death for one another. Now, if I'm in another place, I find out that someone else is a Christian, is the feeling the same? Should be. Thank you. Someone's picking up what I'm throwing down. It's good. It's good. There's not really an attitude of excitement, of camaraderie, of an understanding or belief that that person's going to take a bullet for me if it comes down to it. Now, we might engage in a conversation that talks about what church we attend, which now that we understand what church means, that doesn't make any sense, right? Well, what church do you go to? I am the church, right? We are the church. Or what faith background we subscribe to, that doesn't matter. Now, in the Marine Corps, there's 2 boot camps, so there's usually a little tussle between if you went to the real boot camp, which was the first one, or if you're a Hollywood Marine and you went out to San Diego. But that's just like brothers scrapping, right? Like, it doesn't really matter. And then from that point on, we start to criticize one another. Maybe not verbally, maybe not outwardly. Like, oh, nice to meet you. Keep an eye on you. Right? And see if they're acting out what they say they believe. Like, oh, they're a Christian, but they got tattoos. Oh, they're a Christian, but they colored their hair a different color. Or they're wearing fancy shoes. Or look at the car they drive. Or look at how they talk to their kids. Doesn't sound like esprit de corps to me. What if, instead, we could be united by the fact that God saved us both and that we worship and follow the same Lord and Savior? At the very least for me, when I catch myself doing this, I'm like, well, I got to spend eternity with them anyway. So I might as well start trying to figure out how to like them now. Right? But what if we linked together to find out how we could support one another in our individual callings in life? What if we invite each other to visit each other's worship service to further expand our spiritual repertoire and maybe learn a thing or two? If I walk into a room and someone else discovers that I'm a Marine, whether they've been in the military or not, there's immediately an expectation. There's a label put on me. Okay? Sometimes, I see that look, Mr. Navy over there. Sometimes it might not be a very good label, right? Because we have a reputation. We break things. We've been taught how to hurt people. But we do it well. And that's when our nation calls on us. So there's a level of respect. There's an expectation. You know, like, now that you all know that I'm a Marine, if someone comes in here and starts wielding a gun, most of you are going to look to me and be like, what do we do? You know what to do. Right? But what if someone finds out that I'm a Christian? What's the expectation they have there? I'm judgmental, I'm opinionated, I'm probably going to criticize somehow, some way that they live their lives. Or are they going to be like, oh, he's a Christian, so he's probably loving. I can probably come to him with a problem and ask him to pray for me because I need help. Or I need to speak to God, so maybe I should go and talk to them. Maybe they can help me in that process. Ephesians 6:16, we pull out of where we're reading about the armor of God. Okay? And in Ephesians 6:16, it talks about the flaming arrows of the enemy, and that we take up the shield of faith to protect us from these flaming arrows. Because that shield of faith is going to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Now, the Bible calls the evil one, the devil or adversary, calls him the father of lies. And the accuser of the brethren. So, he accuses those of us who believe in Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he is always lying. Jesus said that when the devil is lying, he is speaking his native tongue. Our faith is our shield that protects us from these lies and these accusations. Now, when you're in a fight or a conflict by yourself, you're only worried about what's coming at you. Okay? You're only worried about bullets, stones, arrows, words, whatever, coming at you, and you got to protect yourself from it, right? I've been studying karate for a little while now, and I'm learning a lot about that. How do you defend yourself from different attacks? Sneak attacks, multiple attacks, attacks in the dark, attacks with your eyes closed, you can't see, attacks that manipulate your body, all that kind of stuff. The one thing that I haven't learned yet in karate, I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, is how do you fight along somebody else? If you're both being attacked, how do you look out for the person to your left or to your right? When you're in a battle with others, you're fighting alongside others in a battle, you're concerned about those to your left and your right as well. You're not just worried about what's coming at you, you're worried about what's coming at him and what's coming at her. You're worried about the person behind you who's supposed to have your back, right? What's good for the group is also good for you. This is esprit de corps. If the group is good, then I'm good. If the group is safe, then I'm good. And sacrificing myself for the group is better for the group than me trying to save my own hide and not worry about anybody else. So it's better that the group survives, even if I have to die. As the church, what we tend to do instead of link shields and stand against the enemy is that we deflect these arrows toward our brothers and sisters standing shoulder to shoulder with us. The enemy laughs at this because we're actually helping him accomplish his goal. And this is why Jesus said that the world will know that we are his disciples by how we love one another. But instead, we see an arrow coming at us, accusing us of something. Maybe it's something that we've already done. Maybe it's picking at our guilt. Maybe it's this arrow is coming and it's calling me a hypocrite. Now I could stand here in my identity in Christ, in my faith, and say, no, I'm not. I'm a child of the King. Or I could say, here it comes. And I throw it at somebody else. Because they're a hypocrite. So I can save my own arrows and I can just take the enemies and throw them at them. Oh, you're a liar? No, I'm not. She is. Oh, you're a thief? No, I'm not. But he is. And one by one, we help the enemy pick off our brothers and sisters. We get to stand there and say, yeah, I'm good. But I'm all by myself. And now all those arrows are coming at me. And I can't stand against them. Because I got nobody to stand to my left, to my right, to help me in my weakness. It's so easy for us to criticize other Christians and say, well, they're not a true believer because they don't practice the way I do. Or, look at that congregation over there. I don't think they're really Christians because, well, they use fancy lights for their worship service and play loud music. Or look at this guy over here who likes to listen to heavy metal music. We point out all these differences of fellow believers, saying that they're not a part of our church. Funny thing is, it's really not our church to begin with. So who are we to say who belongs and who doesn't? It's God's. We are God's assembly. And God calls us to his Ekklesia to tell us this is how I want you to live. These are the ordinances that I have put in your life to protect you, to help you grow, to help you be strong together. I'm not sure if you noticed the mask that I was wearing this morning when I came in, but I did wear it on purpose. My wife got it for me at a retreat that we went to last year, and I saw it, and the camouflage of my military background kind of drew me to it. And then I'm like, oh, cool, stand strong. Yeah, like that sounds tough, right? And then I was like, maybe I should look up the verse. What does it say, right? So I looked up the verse, and my wife got me the mask, and I wear it from time to time. It's the only mask I have that has a Bible verse on it, so I usually wear it to church or something like that. It's my church mask. Now don't laugh. Everyone's got a mask for different occasions right now, right? Like, you have to accessorize. Even if it's just the blue and white one, you've got more than one. So, I thought that the words stand strong and the verse, which if you're only listening to this in the recording, therefore encourage one another and build up one another just as you also are doing. I didn't think they really went together. I thought some guy, this was like his favorite verse. He wanted to make it look cool because he was from the military. He threw some camo on there and, look, I made a mask. Let's sell it for $10 or whatever. Then I realized if I'm going to be wearing this thing, I should probably memorize the verse, right? So that I know what it is. People start asking me, what is 1 Thessalonians 5:11? Let me pull up my Bible app and tell you. As I committed the verse to memory, the Lord made me realize that this is to a congregation. The Apostle Paul was writing to the church in Thessalonica. And this was his encouragement. To stand strong and encourage one another and build up one another. And that's how you're able to stand strong. Just like Jesus said, love one another and then people will know who you are. The church in Thessalonica, they knew who they were because they encouraged one another and they built one another up. They were being the Ekklesia. They had esprit de corps. It's about being united in the Lord and being strong together instead of divided apart. So now you folks, as a small congregation, have proven your own esprit de corps. You've stuck together through many trials, and I know that the closer that we get to officially forming the church in the state of Pennsylvania, they all seem like victories. However, I challenge you to strive to be united with the church around the world. To not let your differences from others divide you, but rather unite you. If you see a church doing something different, don't criticize them for being different. Be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me go check that out. I've learned a lot from it. I mean, being career missionaries, we get to visit many different churches. Not just in another country, but right here in York County. There's various different kinds of churches that support us, that are involved with our ministry. And we've gone to all of them, and Jesus is in all of them. Imagine that. Don't let the father of lies make you think that you have it all figured out. Because you don't. You don't. You never will. But as somebody says, I don't have the answer to that, but I know someone who does. Jesus has it all figured out. As long as we're focused on him, that's all that matters. So don't stop congregating with other believers outside of this group that you see right here around you, to your left and to your right. When we talk about God's army, you're just a little squad, maybe a platoon as you start to grow. Amidst an entire army of believers around the world that are deployed to announce the good news of Jesus Christ. Don't lose sight of that. Forget your name and just remember that you are his. Thank you.
That was good. And man, I just want to encourage you guys that we have been in this journey for a little over a year, and I believe that what Dylan was talking about today, that we are expressing that, where there's no way that we would have been able to get where we're at today if we were divided and we're pointing fingers, and we're calling out each other's faults rather than encouraging, as Dylan was teaching us today. And so I want to encourage you to stay steadfast in what you are doing, and to keep encouraging one another and loving one another. And as I came into this fellowship, when we were part of another church, the only way I knew was more of a conservative background. And so when I went into a charismatic church, I was floored. I was like, man, what are these guys doing? And I remember there was a lady that was worshiping in front of me, and all of a sudden she like jumped way up in the air and fell down in front of me, and like I was going to reach out and catch her, and then I was like, well, no, I don't want to interrupt her worship. I didn't know what to do, and I was just like, this is different, and this is weird. But then the more I was part of this congregation, and just observing and beginning to worship, that's what it was. It was worship. It was just a different worship than what I was used to. And man, that was just a great message, because I am all about not titling or labeling ourselves except being Christ followers. The only label I want us to have is to be a Christ follower. And I don't care if you guys want to worship aloud, worship quietly, speak in tongues, don't speak in tongues. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to God. What matters to God is that you're serving him here on this earth. And I don't want us to be that judgmental church, because believe me, I can be quick to judge. I can be quick to judge. And my wife has been working on me for a long time to knock it off. And so I'm working on it. And I don't want to be that guy. I want to be loving, and I want to be caring, and I want to look at each individual that I come in contact with, and I want to see the good in them. You know who was good at that? Dot. You guys remember Dot? she was a rough and tough lady. And I miss her so much. She's no longer with us, and I miss her so much because she always sees the good in people. And I remember I went to visit her at a hospital, and as the pastor going to visit somebody in a hospital, you're supposed to encourage them and pray for them. And I'm just amazed at just how she continues to see good in people. And I actually asked her to pray for me. I asked her to pray for me that I will be able to see what she sees so that I can see the good in everyone I run into and not look at their outward appearance and see what the world sees, but see what God sees the warrior and the love and the commitment and the endurance and all of the things that God sees in every single one of us, even before we're there. But God sees it. You guys are that. Every single one of us, when we started this journey, we had no idea what we were doing. But every meeting we took and we talked, we had disagreements, we walked, we worked through it. We lived out what God is calling us to do as a church, and it's only the beginning. So I'm encouraging you guys this message will be posted tomorrow. Listen to it again. And listen to it as many times as you need so that you can get it in your heart that this is the church. And I'm excited about finally getting close to a name, but he's right. Those things don't matter. It only matters to the state. That's it. Okay? Can we stand? We're going to worship.